Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive. This week I discuss the alternate history Edwardian sci-fi game Leviathans, Monsters in the Sky. This is a game about gigantic flying battleships in around 1910, pre-World War I. It's had a troubled development history, and that's something I will be going over. Though the setting history itself is interesting in where it departs from real-world history. So, let's sit back, relax, and enjoy as I discuss Leviathans. Before I begin, let me just say, if you like this video, please click like and subscribe down below. Leave me comments or follow me on Twitter. Tell me what you like, what you didn't like, what you'd like to hear me talk about more of in the future, what you'd like to hear me talk about less of in the future. Always looking for ways to help grow and improve the channel. With all that said, let's just get right on into this, shall we? So, Leviathans has had a troubled development history, as I mentioned. You see, like many games, it's made in China, especially as it's a miniature-based game. Now, the concept behind it was awesome. But what happened is there have been a number of hits and delays because of manufacturing. They missed their first planned Gen Con for it because the factory sidelined them, put them back burner. When they finally got everything together, there was an issue with the world map. You see, China has this little law that requires any area that's considered part of China to be illustrated in the same color. Now, they did the world map based on the historical world map at the time. And Taiwan was not considered part of China back that far, back in the 1910 era. And so it was depicted as a separate state, separate color from China. And that kind of ran afoul of the One China map rules. So that caused massive delays. This is also the reason why a lot of the Leviathans fans have the sort of joking comment of "Free Taiwan." Yeah. But, it got released, and it was popular. It did really great the first year. And the second year. And delays. These delays weren't caused by actual game development. In fact, as of right now, the German and Italian fleets have supposedly been fully play-tested. The Japanese and Russian fleets have supposedly been released for general playtest among the playtesting pool at Catalyst. And the Austro-Hungarian fleet is undergoing intense development. But what happened, now understand, this is based on just what I had heard talking to various people in the know at Catalyst at Gen Con, was the factory that they worked with to make the initial box sets had a falling out with Catalyst. Basically, it didn't like that Catalyst expected it to, treat them equal to other customers, even though they were a smaller customer. And so it basically decided it wasn't going to make any more products for them. Which they could have easily worked with, except this factory claimed ownership of the CAD files. The files needed to actually make the masters. And Catalyst has had to figure out a way around this issue while trying to find a new factory to make the miniatures. And surprisingly, it is not that easy to find a new factory once you have a falling out with another factory in China. There's hope in the future, though. The Shadowrun miniatures that have just been released could potentially be forming a relationship with a new factory. Hopefully, we will be seeing new stuff for Leviathans in the future. I really, really hope so, because the game was fantastic. And frankly, I'm kind of tired of just having British versus French. After a while, there's no real variety in those games, so you kind of just know how each one's going to play out just by the first couple moves. So, now we get to talk about the game world history, which is much more fun. With Leviathans, the key point of departure is the development of a substance called electoid. And what electoid is it's a substance that, if you run an electric current through it, causes things to float in the air. Now, someone eventually got the brilliant idea to put it in gigantic tanks and see if they could make a ship float in the air. And it worked. And there was the gradual development and improvement of the electoid technology and distribution of electoid tanks. And you would get, first off, the destroyers, which were initially scouting vessels. And you'd move up to eventually the battleships. The first of which was the HML Leviathan, the thing the game is named for. And these ships don't have as much mass as ocean-going vessels. There are very good reasons for this. Primarily, an ocean-going vessel can displace a lot more water and thus maintain buoyancy at larger sizes, while Leviathans are restricted on how big they are by how much electoid can lift. And this puts practical limits on how big they can get. However, the biggest key departure in this game from the real world history isn't the development of electoid. It's a historical event. The Battle of Tsushima. In real-world history, this battle between the Japanese Navy and the Russian Navy was what made Japan a superpower. This allowed Japan to, be recognized by the rest of the world as a naval force in and of itself. Because at the time, the Russian Pacific Fleet was considered one of the strongest fleets in the world, and Japan's defeat of that was a major upset. Well, Leviathans changed that. Because the Japanese brought a naval fleet, a water navy, and were engaging the Russian water navy. And they were winning. Until the Russian Leviathans showed up. Now, understand, naval ships, the hull is armored, but the deck tends to be lightly armored, if at all. Because, getting plunging fire calculated to go straight into the deck is really, really hard from the perspective of Navy ships. Especially at that time. Today, our Navy ships can do that no problem. Back then, it was difficult. Now, when you have ships in the air that are able to go whoop and bring their guns firing straight down into the waterborne ships, that was a major thing. That changed how warfare was fought. Because at that point, there was no defense against the Leviathans by the Japanese fleet, other than to shoot them down. And they did damage or shoot down several of the Russian Leviathans. But the Russian ships, the Russian sky ships, still were able to crush the Japanese fleet. And with that defeat came the recognition by the rest of the world that seagoing navies were obsolete. And unfortunately, this brings us to where development of the setting ended. Because it's, without future supplements coming out, they've not been able to create the fiction to generate more of the history, more of the lore of the setting. Which is unfortunate. I do very much look forward to the future releases, if and when they come out. But, with that said, let's take a look at gameplay, shall we? Leviathans is a classic hex-based miniature war game. Your ships each take up a specific number of hexes. As they turn on specific pivot points based on the size and scale of the ship. Whether it's a destroyer, a cruiser, an armored cruiser, or a battleship, it turns at a different spot. At the same time, there's the little detail that the turn order is, first while players alternate moving ships, they start moving all their lighter ships first. Then, once they've moved all the lighter ships, then they move their heavier ships, working all the way up to hopefully the battleship that is the core of their fleet. Now, each faction has their own little quirks. The British tend to have a lot of crew slots and are, fairly heavily armored, but slower ships. The French don't have as many crew slots as the British. They're faster, and more of their ships have torpedoes. Now, supposedly, the German ships are like massive, over-armored flying bricks, while the Italians so love torpedoes they created more types of them. But we've not seen those yet. Those are still in this nebulous limbo of a game in development hell. But here's the fun fact about how torpedoes work. You deploy your torpedoes before movement. You put a marker on where it's launching from and a marker on where it's going. And once movement is ended, you draw lines to see where that movement is, where those torpedoes cross. And if a ship is intersected by a torpedo at any point, a torpedo goes through any of the hexes of a ship, that ship got hit. And torpedoes are devastating when they hit. If they hit. However, it's not so much the damage that torpedoes do that are why you use them. It is the fact that by using torpedoes, you are eliminating places the enemy can move. You're restricting your own movement because any ship, friend or foe, that's hit by a torpedo gets hit. But torpedoes are a area denial weapon more than a ship killer. Now, one interesting fact is the initial release used color-coded dice. Now, they used D12s for 12-sided dice, actually, for the whole range of dice. Although, they gave a nice handy chart of what dice can be used to substitute for those. So, if you want to use your own dice, not use theirs, you can just get the appropriate colored dice of the appropriate type. Because you can always buy dice somewhere. But how it works is a weapon has a range value. Inside a certain range, it has one set of dice it rolls. Outside of that, it has another set of dice it rolls. The close in, you're more accurate type thing. And you would roll those dice, taking any benefits from crew that you're assigning to that. And, if you beat the number on on your target ship, you've hit that area. and you look at what you rolled, and that tells you whether you breach the armor. If you breach the armor, you've destroyed that location. And to start damaging a ship, you have to make a certain roll after you've destroyed a location. You have to hit a location you've destroyed a second time. And then you get to roll to see if you blow up the ship based on how many sections of armor have been destroyed, how many sections have been destroyed in that section, and a whole bunch of other things. And simply put, a ship can take a beating. And crew are your friend because you can assign crew to do damage control and repair damaged sections of your ship. I know when I was playing this, the hardest ship to take down was the Leviathan herself. Just because she had enough crew slots in each location that unless you were hitting the crew, it was able to repair itself more quickly than you were able to damage it. And usually, because it was such a slow ship, by the time you were able to start damaging it, most of your French fleet was limping because of how slow it was. It didn't get to the battle very quickly. Note that one trend I noticed playing the game was a tendency for one side to end up totally immobilized first. And the side that got immobilized first is generally the one that would lose, because the other side would then protect their afts and keep them away from these ships as they would begin to hammer into you. Piece by piece, one ship at a time. But, like I said, we're dealing with a game that had pretty much its initial release only. I found it a fun game, and I look forward to future developments. That's pretty much it for this discussion. Next video is going to be on the Deadlands RPG, specifically the Deadlands Classic Anniversary Edition that was kickstarted a couple years ago. So, until the next video, it's like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.